Good morning, everyone, and welcome to NJBIA Live from the State Capitol. I'm Vinny Civitello, Communications Manager for the New Jersey Business and Industry Association. With us today are our very own Vice President of Government Affairs, Frank Robinson, and our Vice President of Taxation and Economic Development, Andrew Musick. A few housekeeping matters before we get started. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be emailed to you tomorrow along with the PowerPoint for today's presentation, so be on the lookout for those. I'd also like to draw your attention to the questions tab. Frank and Andrew would be happy to take all of your questions, so don't hesitate to write them in as they come to you. And I mean that, write them in as they come to you, because you might get shy and forget what you were going to say by the end of the presentation, and today's presentation is going to be a little on the short side, so you might want to get your questions in just to keep it rolling. So now let's get things started. Andrew?
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for taking the time to join us this morning. I know we had to reschedule this webinar as we had a kind of a unexpected snowstorm last week in March. So I thank you for your flexibility and your patience in that regard, and also just want to wish everybody a happy opening day 2018 for the start of the Major League Baseball season. But we'll get right started. Get started here about the budget. On Tuesday, March 13th, Governor Murphy delivered his fiscal year 2019 budget proposal, which spends $37.4 billion and maintains a surplus of $743 million. The proposal reflects a $2.7 billion increase from the fiscal year 2018 budget, which represents about an 8% increase. Revenue growth is expected to be 5.7%, or just over $2 billion, resulting from several anticipated tax law changes, and we'll get to those in a bit. But in terms of revenue increases, that includes an 8.4% increase in gross income tax revenues, 8.2% increase in sales tax revenue, and a 10.8% increase in corporation business tax revenues. We'll move on to the tax changes that are going to be impacting both businesses and individuals. We'll start with the corporation business tax changes. The governor's budget recommends a number of changes on the way in which New Jersey taxes corporations, and they're expected to generate $110 million. And they include the following: combined reporting with a limited water's edge election, market-based sourcing, and the reinstitution of the taxation of international holding companies. The proposals also include a one-time tax on the deemed repatriation of foreign-held assets, and further revisions to hold New Jersey harmless for certain other provisions of the recent federal tax reform plan.
This is Frank Robinson. Just want to point it out for everyone's attention is that yesterday the Senate President, who has been talking about instituting an increase in the corporate business tax, sort of made an announcement that he was rethinking that, and that he was leaning towards the governor's suggestion that we do an increase in the Millionaires Tax, which we'll talk on later. So at this point in time, it looks like an increase in the corporate business tax itself will be avoided in this budget. Back to you, Andrew.
Thanks, Frank. Moving on to the Millionaires Tax. The budget proposal includes a Millionaires Tax provision, which would increase the top income tax rate to 10.75% on income above $1 million. The change is projected to generate $765 million and be retroactive to January 1st of 2018. New Jersey's current top rate is 8.97% on income over $500,000. Additional changes announced by Governor Murphy include the restoration of the sales and use tax to 7%, up from the current 6.625%, modernization of the sales tax to include ride-sharing services, transient accommodations, and certain remote sales, legalization, regulation, and taxation of adult-use marijuana, the imposition of a carried interest fairness fee, and the taxation of e-cigarettes. Moving on towards transportation, the budget proposal includes $2 billion in state transportation capital program funding, which includes $1.2 billion for state and local highway and bridge projects, $760 million for mass transportation projects, and $800 million in pay-as-you-go funding. During his remarks, the governor also noted that NJ Transit will receive a general fund appropriation of $383 million to allow NJ Transit to address immediate shortfalls and hiring efforts while providing near-term relief to riders while structural improvements are implemented. Moving on, discussing education and workforce development funding. The budget proposes spending more than $14.9 billion on pre-K through 12 education, which represents a year-over-year increase of $283 million in Formula Aid. Governor Murphy also stated that this would be the first year of a 4-year ramp up to full funding under the School Funding Reform Act. The proposal also builds upon the $25 million ensured by the legislature in the current fiscal year and adds an additional $57 million increase in pre-K aid for a total investment of $82 million. Governor Murphy recommended an additional $2 million to fund the expansion of computer science education, to establish a grant program to help districts offer college-level computer science courses. The budget proposal also supports new investments to establish STEM-focused high schools that allow students to earn advanced degrees while preparing for the jobs of the future. Under the budget proposal, the Workforce Development Partnership Program, administered by the Department of Labor and Workforce Development, will use $34.5 million for new and expanded programs that help prepare workers for technical skilled jobs. This would be done through apprenticeships and on-the-job training, by upgrading the skills of incumbent workers to help them remain employed, and through incentivizing businesses to expand or relocate in New Jersey. The fiscal year 2019 budget proposal also provides a total of $2.4 billion towards direct support of higher education and student financial aid programs. Governor Murphy proposed a $50 million investment to establish new assistance programs for recent high school graduates and adults who have yet to complete their degrees. This is projected to allow nearly 15,000 more students from families with incomes below $45,000 to attend community college tuition free. Additionally, funding for tuition aid grants or TAG grants will see an increase of $7 million for a total of $432.9 million, while the proposal increases the Educational Opportunity Fund, or EOF, by $1.5 million to $45.32 million. Looking at hospital funding, the governor's proposal maintains charity care payments to hospitals at $252 million. It also maintains funding for graduate medical education at $218 million. These funds are available to all hospitals that train doctors, and they help offset the costs associated with the training of New Jersey's next generation of physicians. The fiscal year 2019 budget also provides $166 million in state and federal funds for the Delivery System Reform Incentive Payments Program, which helps spur continuous improvement in the quality of care that's delivered to residents. The budget includes a $3.2 billion public pension payment, which represents 6/10 of the actuarial recommended contribution, or the ARC payment. Additionally, the contribution represents the largest single-year contribution ever. The fiscal year 2019 budget includes $3.4 billion for active employee health benefits and post-retirement medical health benefits. The budget assumes the passage of common sense out-of-network reform and anticipates the State Health Benefits Program Plan Design Committee will readopt reforms that had been approved in prior years. And finally, the budget proposes targeted tax relief measures for homeowners and families. These proposals include increasing the state property tax deduction cap from $10,000 to $15,000, allowing taxpayers with income below $60 million to take a new $60,000, to take a new state child and dependent care tax credit, which is based on the federal tax credit program, and increasing the earned income tax credit from 35% of the federal credit to 40% over 3 years. In terms of process, after April 12th, the legislature is going to go on their annual budget break. During this time, both the Senate and the Assembly budget committees will take public testimony on the budget, and NJBIA is scheduled to testify on both April 3rd and April 9th. The committees also hear from various commissioners to discuss their specific department's budget. This includes 2 revenue updates from OLS and the Department of Treasury, one at the beginning of April, and then again in mid-May. The legislature, they actually just released their schedule this morning. It looks like they'll be coming back in early May, and budget discussions will continue at this time. The FY 2019 budget must be passed by the state legislature and signed by the governor by July 1st of 2018 per the constitutional deadline. At this time, the governor cannot add, but may remove portions of the budget through the line item veto process. Thank you for your attention this morning, and I'm happy to take any questions that you guys may have.
Thanks, Andrew. I want to give everyone a second to type in any questions they might have. So while I'm doing that, I'm going to take a second and remind you about the handouts tab. We get a lot of questions from people about how you can download the slides. So just open up the tab marked handouts in your GoToWebinar panel, and the file is right there. You can also wait until tomorrow and they'll be emailed to you along with the video recording of today's webinar. And there's the questions tab. By all means, if you want to ask a question of Andrew and Frank, you've got two experts here. Make sure to take advantage of them. So with all of that out of the way, Andrew, Frank, tell us how the Millionaires Tax will affect businesses.
As BIA has said for many, many years, probably going back to Governor McGreevy's administration, we've always been concerned about a so-called millionaires tax. There was initially a tax recommended back in the early 2000s that would tax income beyond $1 million up to $250,000. Then there was a $500,000 millionaires tax. And now the one that's being proposed is a true millionaires tax, which is better in some ways. However, having said that, we've viewed a millionaires tax as a tax on small business. There are tens of thousands of small businesses in the state of New Jersey that filed their business taxes through the personal income tax. A lot of them are sole proprietors or very, very small companies, and that's the way that their corporation is structured, and so they pay it through the income tax. And as everyone knows, there are relatively few deductions. There are some, but relatively few deductions for businesses through the personal income tax. So we see that affecting at least 20,000 individuals who bring in more than $54 billion in adjusted gross income every year, and this will be an additional tax on them. Everyone knows property taxes in New Jersey are very, very high. About 40% of the taxes that businesses pay are property taxes. Then on top of that, they have their federal taxes, and they also have all the different taxes, sales tax, other user fees. And so that we just see that an increase in the income tax for that category of business people will be harmful to the economy.
Okay, still no questions from the audience, so I'll give them one last chance, and while we give them one last chance, I'll ask one follow-up to that. So this is something I've always wondered. I think that to play devil's advocate, when people support a millionaire's tax, I don't think they think about the small business owner, the sole proprietor. Is there any way to exempt them so that it could get to the intent of what people are supporting here?
Since the tax is on the personal income tax, the only way to exempt businesses from that really would be to tax it in a different way. Ergo was the Senate President's suggestion that we raise the corporate business tax instead of the millionaires tax. We think raising either one of those taxes is just harmful to small businesses, because while many tens of thousands of small businesses do file their taxes through the income tax, there are as many, if not many more, that file it through the corporate business tax. So whether you're a small business that is organized as a corporation, or if you're a small business organized as a partnership or an LLC, you would see a raise in your taxes. We've always contended here at NJBIA that New Jersey's problem is that we don't have enough revenue. Our problem is that we spend way too much money. So we've always been advocating and looking at ways to more efficiently supply government services that operates a little bit more like a way a business would operate. So bottom line is, let's not raise taxes first. Let's look at how we spend the tax money we already raised. We have been very supportive of a move by the Senate President to take a look at the overall taxing policy and spending policy. He put together a commission earlier this year. We would hope that that commission would come back with some kind of report before we do adopt a budget on June 30th, but I'm not sure that the timing will be correct on that.
We have one from John, who asks, on a radio program earlier this week, Senate President Sweeney walked back his proposal to increase the CBT. Does NJBIA anticipate that there will be an additional proposal to counter the governor's proposed millionaires tax?
Thanks for the question. And at this time, I don't know that there's another proposal out there to counter the millionaires tax. But as happens every year over the next couple of months, the governor and the legislature are going to be in discussions and debates over the budget process. And during this time, they're going to discuss all of the different proposals that are on the table. And as I mentioned before, by the end of June, they have to come to an agreed upon budget by July 1st of 2018.
Yeah, I completely agree with Andrew. Also, to people that have been following this process would have seen yesterday at the Assembly budget hearing, the Vice Chairman of the Assembly Budget Committee, John Berzicelli, from District 3 down in Gloucester and Salem County, characterized the governor's proposal as a placeholder budget. To some extent, that is true. I mean, a governor proposes and the legislature disposes. Since our Constitution, which was our third Constitution, was adopted in New Jersey in 1947, with the deadline, constitutional deadline of June 30th for legislature to adopt a balanced budget, one could argue that every governor's proposal is a placeholder, and the legislature is currently going through its constitutional duty of reviewing that proposal line by line. As Andrew mentioned, all the departments will be called in before the Assembly and the Senate over the course of the next few months, and all of these proposals will be reviewed. And as Andrew mentioned earlier, he will be testifying on behalf of the NJBIA at both of those hearings, one for the Assembly and one for the Senate. And we will be updating our members on a regular basis in any changes in the proposals. And we'll also be talking in more depth about things that we like and, quite frankly, things that we dislike in this proposal.
Okay. Well, that looks like everything we have. So don't forget, all of you will be receiving a recording of today's webinar and the PowerPoint slides via email. Lastly, when you close out of the webinar, a survey will come up on your screen that we hope you'll fill out so we can understand how to best provide you important information in a webinar format. Our next webinar, Surviving the HR War, will take place Wednesday, May 2nd, so by all means, feel free to register for that one at our website at njbia.org/webinars. I don't usually read the full descriptions for these things here, but I found this one particularly interesting, so I thought I'd share. Each year, NJBIA answers hundreds of questions from human resource professionals and business owners throughout New Jersey. This presentation discusses some of the funniest, toughest, and most delicate questions we've gotten over the years to provide practical pointers and real-life scenarios to seasoned HR professionals. We'll present the problem and tell you how we helped the employer to resolve it. So I know I'm excited to see some of the funniest things that have come across the wire, and I hope to see you there too. So until next time, for Frank Robinson and Andrew Musick, this is Vinny Civitello thanking you for being with us this morning and wishing you a great day.